Time to look at the Warden Rework. Just a couple of general notes with this rework. Every gambit in the fray stance and in assailment will be the same. It'll no longer matter which stance you're in, because all the effects will be the same regardless of your stance. So no more switching to range to do your range bleeds. The gambits are the same regardless of your stance. Every gambit will also be available in any line, so a gambit like Shield Mastery is no longer just locked behind blue line. Yellow line has become a utility line, so you can now spec into red or into blue and then pick points from the other lines. But yellow is kind of your utility line now. When it comes to gambit chains, they're gonna be a pretty important part of the new Warden. And why are they important? To complete a gambit chain, you need to perform a 2-length gambit, for example, Precise Blow. Follow it up with a 3-length gambit, for example, Brink of Victory. And then to finish the gambit chain, you need to perform a 4-length, like Mighty Blow, or a 5-length, like Unerring Strike. It doesn't matter which gambits you do to make a chain. It can be any 2-length, like Warcry, and then you can follow it up with Power Attack. You could finish with Desolation. That would count as a chain. The only gambits that do not build a chain are your Deft Strike, Defensive Strike, or Goad. So 1-1, 2-2, 3-3 do not count as a chain. Now, why would you need to do chains? First off, I can start with Warcry, and if I do Power Attack, doing gambits in a chain will actually buff the Power Attack bleed. It'll be stronger than it would have been without a chain. Same goes for the last gambit in a chain. I'll just do Unerring. This bleed will be stronger than it would have been without a chain. And another thing, completing a chain will give you 1 tick of Advanced Technique. And Advanced Technique is a new mechanic that is used for your cooldowns. So we're going to look at that more closely later. But if I were to do another chain like I'm doing right now, I'm going to get tier 2 of Advanced Technique right there. And I can do one more chain, which would put me at max Advanced Technique 3. And this is the max you can get. This will stay as long as you're in combat, or until you use a cooldown that requires Advanced Technique. Just to show the difference in damage with a chain, this is Unerring Strike without any chain, and I've now built a 2 gambit and a 3 gambit, so my finisher is a 5 gambit. As you can see, the Unerring bleed increased by 20k. So the idea is that you complete the chains for the extra damage or the extra healing in real gambits, but it's pretty clear that chains are a big part of the new Warden. Time to look at how the gambits currently work. If you look at the bottom, you can see the Warcry line pretty much works the same way. You'll notice that you now have 32 seconds of dots. This can also be increased to 36 seconds by using Warden's Triumph. Warden's Triumph gives an additional dot pulse, but Warcry, Brink, Surety, Desolation pretty much work as before, where they do AoE light damage over time. You'll note that Brink lost its 10 targets and AoE, so it's now pretty much the same as Surety and Desolation. And the Warcry line is also the line that puts the suppression debuff on your targets, the minus outgoing damage debuff. So on tier 3, that would be 5%. Now, if you take a look at the offensive strike line, this line is now a AoE burst line. You can see they do 2 attacks and it's 6 targets, 6 meters. Same frontal as Brink, Surety, and Deso, but instead these do burst damage. Another thing that's tied to the offensive strike line is the battering strikes critical defense debuff that I didn't trait right now. But if you trait this, they will have a debuff for crit defense. And finally we have Unseen Strike, a new gambit, 13131. big frontal AoE damage, but it will also consume the Warcry line bleeds or a cash out burst damage, and I believe that burst damage will be AoE as well. So a good way for some AoE burst is having these bleeds on the target and then using unseen strikes to cash out these bleeds. Next up we have the power attack line. This line is still the same, big bleed damage over time. And if we go up, we can look at the boot line, the 1-2 line. The boot, Onslaught, Wall of Steel, Cauterizing Steel will have the physical mitigation, so the marked targets will be applied through the boot line. You can also see some incoming healing. That's only because I traded everything in red. Typically, as a DPS Warden, you probably won't be getting this, but you can trade this for an incoming healing debuff to the target. But the boot line is now a single target burst damage line, and Cauterizing Steel will also consume the power attack line bleeds or extra burst damage single target. So just like the unseen strikes for the Warcry line, Cauterizing Steel cashes out the power attack bleeds or extra single target burst. We have Adroit Maneuver. This has changed. It's no longer the induction buff that we've known to be using for the hunters. Adroit Maneuver now gives 16% attack duration and gives a finesse rating as well. And Warden's Triumph is actually now a pretty big buffing skill. Gives you 12 melee and ranged damage, and this is actual damage, so it's a pretty important cooldown or gambit to use. And you also get another Warden Gambit damage over time pulse, so another dot for 55 seconds. And like I said before about Goad, it now just deals light damage and it procs your battle memory. That's it. The Precise Blow line, as you can see, will be responsible for the diminished debuff. If you trade diminished targets, you're gonna have the diminished debuff on the Precise Blow line. And as you can see, this bleed line kind of works like before, only the ticks are a bit lower than other bleeds. Instead of 32 seconds, it's only 24 on these gambits. And you'll notice the new gambit at the end, Spear of Fate. Spear of Fate ticks every second for 12 seconds, so it's a shorter burst bleed gambit. We also have a new gambit called Deflection 3-2-1. This gambit is AoE target, deals damage, but more importantly, greatly decreases threat against multiple targets. If you feel like you have a lot of threat, you can use the deflection to lose some threat. Resounding Challenge now works in melee and range like every gambit, and it still has the pretty large bleed on it. The Persevere line is now a self-healing line. If you need heals for yourself, Persevere line is for you. You might take note that Persevere is currently bugged and the heal is way too high, but looking at the other heals, you can kind of expect where Persevere will fall. Persevere will also give incoming healing modifier to yourself. We have a few shield gambits. Shield Mastery is responsible for your physical mitigations. You can see these buffs last a minute 20 seconds, so it's pretty nice for tanking Warden. Shield Mastery will give you 5% physical mitigations, while Shield Tactics will give you 5% tactical mitigations. And you also get some block rating and crit defense from these. And Shield Tactics also gives you stun immunity. Readied Blade reduces the incoming melee damage by 12%, also gives you some parry rating. And Shield Up reduces the tactical and ranged damage by 12%. All these gambits can help you take less damage as a Warden tank. The Impressive Flourish line is now more of a self-buffing line. So Impressive Flourish will give you plus 5% partial parry chance, plus some parry rating. Maddening Strike will give a partial evade chance, plus threat generation and evade rating. Dance of War gives you 3% physical mitigations, and Fistmit and evade rating. And Conviction will still give the Fellowship-wide heal over time, but also 3% attack mit and evade rating. So as you can see, the gambits have been streamlined a bit to make more sense. and there's a lot of creativity to be had, since you can use the Gambits in between each other. You don't have to follow their chain. You can do a chain in any order as long as it's a 2 Gambit, 3 Gambit, and finish by a 4 or a 5 Gambit. Make the damage higher or the healing stronger. Time to look at some blue line cooldowns. First off, we're going to look at for the free peoples. This is for the free peoples without any advanced techniques on the left. And this cooldown now is instant. You get 20% reduced 15% incoming damage. And your fellowship gets minus 2.5% reduced incoming damage for 20 seconds. Now, as you can see, with 1 advanced technique and then 2 advanced technique and then 3, the strength will increase on this cooldown. And at max advanced technique, you will take 27.5 reduced incoming damage and your fellowship minus 15% incoming damage. I now have max advanced technique. I'm gonna pop this cooldown. As you can see, 27.5 reduced incoming damage. So pretty good cooldown now. And the cooldown on the skill is only a minute and a half. Now the next cooldown I want to take a look at is Restorative Shield Work. Another blue line cooldown. And the way this works, depending on your advanced technique, from 1, 2, or 3, you will get tiers of Restorative Shield Work. I'm now at max Restorative Shield Work. You can see I'm going to get 50% partial block chance. I'm just going to pop this so we can see what it works like. With max, I have 5 stacks. Every time I get hit by the dummy, I heal 10%. For these 10 seconds, every time you get hit, you restore 10% morale every time. I do believe there's like a 1 second cooldown in between the hits. So just think of it as like a 50% morale heal over 5 seconds. Because typically you will get hit at least 5 times over 10 seconds while tanking a boss. Or even if you're tanking a lot of adds, this will kind of shoot your health up pretty quickly in 5 seconds. If you're getting hit really slowly, then you'll just have the partial block chance and you'll heal 10% every time you get hit. This skill is kind of like a catch a breath in a way. Now the final blue line cooldown we're going to look at is Desperate Combat. This skill lasts for 30 seconds. When you activate it, you unlock a new skill. As you can see here, it's currently called Desperate Fist. This will change depending on the gambit you use. So if you use a gambit that starts with 3, this will change to Desperate Fist. If you use a gambit that starts with 2, it will change to Desperate Shield. If you use a gambit that starts with Quick Thrust, then it'll be Desperate Spear. And depending on your advanced technique number, you will get a set amount of uses of this. As you can see, they have different mechanics. Desperate Spear is a frontal AoE damage, putting incoming damage on your target for 10 seconds. Desperate Shield is also a frontal hitting damage, but it will instead heal you for every target hit, so like an 80k heal every time you hit a mob. And Desperate Fist is a force taunt, but it's not a threat copy, it's just a taunt. It doesn't copy any threat, so don't rely on this as a main taunt. Alright, I think I'm ready to see how this exactly works. Advanced technique at max. Desperate Combat used. You get 4 uses of this with Desperate Combat. As you can see, it's currently a Desperate Fist. So I want to use 1 use for the taunt. Okay. But I want to put the incoming damage on it. So I'll use a Spear Gambit. Skill will change to Desperate Spear. Alright, 1 more use. Incoming damage is on the target. I also want a quick heal. I'm going to use a Shield Gambit. The skill changes to Desperate Shield, but I took too long. The time window to use them expired, but you get the idea. If you want to change it around, you can do it mid cooldown, or if you want to just spam, for example, Desperate Spear, then you can do that for the incoming damage. But that's how Desperate Combat works. As a Redline Warden, you of course get Recklessness. Recklessness will now be stronger depending on your advanced techniques consumed. This is the base Recklessness, and with 3 advanced technique, you can see that the Recklessness strength is doubled. 30% melee damage and range damage. The Javelin of Deadly Force is now a trait in yellow, almost at the bottom. You put points into marked target and diminished. Javelin of Deadly Force will also apply marked and diminished to your targets. So marked target is applied by the boot line, diminished target is applied by precise blow line, but Javelin of Deadly Force is a way to hit a lot of targets. So if you're pulling a lot of trash mobs, it's a good way to hit a lot of targets with marked and diminished. We also have a couple of cooldowns at the bottom of yellow. First one is Rapid Techniques. This skill will remove your mastery skill cooldowns for 4 seconds, then reset mastery cooldowns periodically for 6 seconds afterwards. There's basically 10 seconds of really fast masteries, kind of like a replacing your seize the moment. We're gonna try out this skill. Alright, I'm gonna try out the Rapid Techniques cooldown. Start my rotation. Alright, I need masteries back. Okay, 4 seconds should be up. There we go. As you can see, the masteries will keep resetting like every 2 seconds. It's basically 10 seconds of seize the moment. The Rapid Techniques cooldown. Pretty nice cooldown. And the last cooldown we're going to look at is Way of the Spear. This is another one that changes depending on your last used gambit. It also gets stronger depending on your advanced technique. Make sure I stay in combat here. So, Way of the Spear. Currently Way of the Spear, and if I change it by using a shield gambit, it will turn into Way of the Shield, and if I use a fist gambit, it will change to the Way of the Fist. Basically, this is a 15-second cooldown, and if you want to use Way of the Spear, you get 40% gambit initial hit damage, so burst damage. If you use Way of the Shield, you get shield gambit line healing, so more healing on your shield heals, and the Way of the Fist gives you damage over time. I can see this being mainly used for DPS Warden, the damage over time. Take a look at Unerring Strike. I use Way of the Fist, 15% damage over time, and as you can see, the bleed increase. Yeah, that's the other yellow line cooldown, 15 seconds of whichever buff you prefer. Alright, time to look at the trait lines themselves. What has changed? What does it look like currently? You just take a look at blue line, you can see the new skill, Restorative Shield Work. You can also see that you get both 7% physical and tactical mitigation just from speccing blue. I'm gonna try out blue line. Up left is Fist Damage, Fist Gambit Damage in the Warcry. Persevere Healing, Careful Shield Work makes your shield up gambit stronger. Careful Blade Work makes your readied blade stronger. You have your Defiant Challenge taunt. Bane of Shadow is light type damage. You can get some critical defense. Stand Your Ground. Final rank gives you 2% block and parry chance, plus some ratings. Unassailable gives your shield gambit buffs increased duration. Practice Openers buffs your gambit openers. Indefatigable gives your shield gambit line more healing, more hot pulses in Lasting Hope. Never Surrender cooldown reduced. Morale tap damage and healing increased. For the Free People's cooldown, we already looked at this. Fellowship Protector gives Conviction a mitigation buff that is stronger for every nearby ally. Already 3%. I wonder if it just increases the rating of it to work. I'm not in Fellowship. Physical mitigation. Oh, tier 2, okay. So you get Fizmit as well if you're close to a Fellowship member or someone. The set bonuses in blue. Thrill of Battle is more morale tap damage and healing. Shield Mastery gives mitigation to Shield Mastery and Shield Tactics. Elegant Finish. You get more buff duration and healing for doing chains. So doing chains in blue is a good thing. Shield Tactics buffs your defenses from the shield gambits. Close Call on evade or partial evade, you restore some morale. Exaltation of Battle, 2 pulses to AoE morale taps, and you have your Desperate Combat cooldown. Moving into Redline Warden, you can see at the top that this trait has been changed. Used to be Gambit Builder damage, it's now just purely melee damage. Still have 20% bleed damage. Quick Sweep has been removed, so this is changed into Mighty Blow, Power Attack, and Unerring Strike bleed damage increase. You have your Physical Mastery. Way of the Spear increases the Spear Gambit initial damage. You have Light type damage. On the offense gives Morale tap damage and healing increase. No Respite for the Wicked gives the boot line and incoming healing debuff. Aggravating Wounds gives a dot crit chance. Deep Wounds gives more dot critical damage. Warden's Triumph increase duration and buffs, and also gives a pulse. Lasting Impression for more dot pulses. Recklessness cooldown and Muscle Memory, new trait. Using a skill through battle memory will restore a small amount of power. So Redline, pretty similar, but no more Quick Sweep. A bit more damage, I would say. Looks pretty nice to me. And finally, let's go into the new utility Yellow Line and see what's in store here. From the top left, we have ranged damage. So if you want to play ranged Warden, this is for you. 10% attack duration in Assailment, another ranged trait. You want to play ranged Warden. Movement training increases the rating buffs of your shield Gambits. Marked target to increase the marked target debuff duration and also to apply this through the boot line. Diminished targets to increase the duration and also apply it through the precise blow line. You have your finesse rating. Throwing arm increases the javelin skill max range, another ranged trait. Bullseye increases critical chance and ranged critical damage. Battering strikes will add defense debuff to the offensive strike line. Strong foundations, if you put 2 points into this, your gambit builders, so for example your quick thrust, will reduce the masteries that start with 1, such as Spear and Shield, by 2 seconds. So if this is on cooldown and you use this will be reduced by 1 second, and every other gambit that starts with the 1. Same goes for 2 and 3. They will also reduce the cooldowns of their respective masteries. Enduring Assailment will increase the durations of your Suppression, your Battering Strikes, and your No Respite for the Wicked debuffs by 20 seconds. Creating Suppression will add a damage debuff to the Warcry line, reducing the outgoing damage of your enemies. Piercing Javelins, your ranged Gambits get some armor penetration. Javelin of Deadly Force, AoE Javelin skill that will also apply marked and diminished to your targets. Adroit Ambush, this actually, if you trait this and you use Adroit Maneuver in combat, your ambush will not have an induction. So basically you can be in combat, use Adroit, and then whenever you want, you can pop your ambush for a 5-second 50% run speed. Snapshot, your Gambit builders have a chance to reset your Javelin skill cooldowns. Fire at Will, this is a cooldown you can pop for your Fellowship, giving 5% ranged tactical damage and minus 10% attack duration. It's only a 10-second duration though, with a 1-minute cooldown, so kind of underwhelming. And as a Warden, you don't really want to be a buff stick, you know? You want to be a damage dealer. And finally at the bottom we have Way of the Spear, / Way of the Shield, / Way of the Fist cooldown. And you also have your Rapid Techniques, quote unquote, your new Seize the Moment cooldown. That's the Yellow Line utility. There's a lot of things for both blue and red to grab from the other lines, so it's a pretty interesting to set up a Warden trait tree. Going to be a lot of discussions about that, and I can't wait to see all the different kinds of rotations that Wardens come up with. There's so much potential, so many ways to do stuff, so it's going to be interesting to see. Overall, I like this rework. Warden seems interesting to me, and I can't wait to actually try out some rotations. Hello, this is Future Ghyn. This video was recorded when the first beta was open, but this video is being uploaded a day before the second beta opens. And I just felt like I should let people know that there's probably going to be some big changes, especially to the chains and how they work. So just stay tuned for more information on that in future videos over the next few days. Thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to help out the channel, leave a like, join my Discord, and I'll see you in the next one. If you're playing or looking to play Lord of the Rings online, there is one place you need to be. The Ghynevere! The Ghyniverse is a community Discord server for the game Lord of the Rings Online. In this server, you'll find anything from giveaways. There's also a frequently asked questions channel that I would recommend checking out first. You'll be able to see when I put out new YouTube videos, whenever I stream. You can also ask for the streamer role, and you'll be able to post your own streams in this server for everyone to see. There's currently over 5,000 members in this Discord, and it keeps growing. You will also find discussion channels about the game, LOTRO. You can ask any questions in the help channel. There's discussions for every single class in the game and PvP. But one of the best things about this server is the best in slot items section. In this section you can find trait lines for every single class. You will find screenshots of the current best gear being displayed. In this channel you'll find charts showing what stats you need for your characters, mitigations, mastery crit, finesse, but you'll also find useful information about drop rates in different instances. I hope you will consider joining my server, and maybe one day I'll see you in Middle Earth.